goes.
It's gonna be fun.
We're live. We're probably like 2 seconds early, but the truth is that Dr. Kristy Hollingshead-Seitz, or just Dr. Kristy Hollingshead, and Dr. Bart Andrews were making me laugh about vocabulary. And it was mildly dirty.
No.
We're live. Welcome to SPSM. This is at Doc Foreman. Happy Valentine's Day. So we had Super Bowl last week. And we have Valentine's Day this week, but we also always have or often have SPSM chat even still, because some of you are spending time with your loved ones, and some of you are secretly watching us on your phones.
Yeah, I wonder if Sean's actually got it hidden under the table or something, right? He may.
That's probably true. Stuck on social work. So we're really excited about today because we have somebody that I have wanted to. There's sort of a group of people that I've been sort of giving to SPSM and sort of bits, because and you're getting sort of a flood of data science experts a little bit all at once for reasons. So I'm really, really excited that Dr. Hollingshead chose to come on tonight. Tonight we're going to really be talking about hashtag CLPsych16 and a little bit about this area of research and how the conference works, because some of you may actually want to go or know someone who does want to go, and because even if you don't go, many of you really actually probably want to participate virtually, and I want you to learn how to do that. Also, there's a call for papers out and some cool projects. And also, we're going to learn what a shared task is, because in my house, that's the chore wheel, but I think that the data scientist means something else. I'm at Doc Foreman, your moderator, and we have Tony Wood, who is IT production. Tony, say hi to the people. Wish them a happy Valentine's Day. Hello?
He's got no sound.
He's got no sound, so I'm going to speak for Tony. Tony, just keep moving your lips. Hi, I'm Tony Wood. I don't like people, but I'm here at SPSM anyway. Shoot me your questions on Twitter at @ADWWW, and I'll get right with you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, that was a pretty good Tony spiel. I mean, that's kind of what he does. We should just pre-record that. We don't even really, right? I mean, we're sucking up a lot of bandwidth with Tony to do that little piece, don't you think? Right.
So this is at Dr. Bart Andrews, or at Bart Andrews. Bart, introduce yourself to the people.
I am at Bart Andrews. I am Vice President of Clinical Practice and Evaluation, which is really a bit of a mouthful, at Behavioral Health Response, an amazing crisis agency in St. Louis, Missouri. Award-winning, and we opened our 1,000th case on Friday morning.
Are you kidding me?
Since 2008. We've had more than 1 million cases, but with the new data system, we actually opened our 1,000th case. So that's the 1,000th unique caller that we've had since 2008.
Who did the ID number 1 million?
I don't know. Actually, I do know. I just there was an email that went out, but it was a big deal. We had balloons, and it was very cool. So that was very exciting. I was on the phones on Saturday to the chagrin of my fellow clinicians, because I'm really slow and I talk to people too long, and
What does that mean?
It means that I don't take as many calls as I should. Slow.
How do you know it's too long?
Well, when other people have taken when you need to shave after each call, that's a sign that you've probably been on the phone too long.
I don't know. You can just that was going somewhere and it just hockey sticked away. I like it.
Yeah, staying on safe ground, because at SPSM we keep it clean, kids.
We're so clean. And you learned what a cognitive mechanism is in the pre-show?
A cogmech?
A cogmech?
Those of us in the know call it a cogmech. So, I mean, if you're just new to this sort of thing, you might... Yeah, if you're new to this, you want to spell it all out.
I'm new, so go gentle with me and explain.
Yeah. It's words like wishing and withholding and or worrying.
They're all things you do internally with your
Yeah.
thing.
This is my Socratic teaching style. You answer the question. I kick it back to you, and then you show me what you've learned from me.
I'm not allowed to show that on TV anymore.
Or Kristy. Did you prep Kristy for this show? Kristy,
I
have
did
you watched this show?
I did actually. And this is, everybody, I'm so excited. Okay, so this is one of my favorite people. This is Dr. Kristy Hollingshead-Seitz, but we're just going to call her Dr. Hollingshead because she tells me not to do all the words all the time. But I want to, I want to start with the story about Dr. Hollingshead. So we get invited to CL Psych, and I know of Kristy, and I see her on the video a little bit, but I get to meet her actually sort of last year. I believe it was in June. And so she is one of the conference organizers for the Computational Linguistic Psychology sort of conference at this big Mama Jamma International sort of linguistics conference that happens every year, and they have sort of a sub-conference that happens within it, which is what she's going to talk about today. And it turns out she is the nicest, smartest person ever, and funny, and also so when you went to camp and there was the one mom who made sure that everybody was where they were supposed to be on time, nicely, and doing what they were supposed to be nicely, and everything was I's dotted, T's crossed. She's that person, and I may be a little impulsive or whatever, and she would just and so she's got all of these great geniuses, and we're all sort of nerdy and sort of and she just herded the cats the entire time. And anyone who can do that has a gift. Also, she loves words and sounds that you make when you're making words, sort of, I think. I don't explain that well. So without any further ado, I'm really excited for her to be here today to explain what CL Psych is and a little bit about the research that happens here, or there. This is Dr. Hollingshead. Everybody say hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hey,
so,
what's going on?
what is a cognitive mechanism?
I don't want to talk about cognitive.
Just really quickly.
Google it. It's a, all right.
I just did that earlier with something Bart texted me, and I'm not doing that again.
What? Did you really? You didn't really Google that, did you?
I did, and then I went, that's really specific porn! Anyway, go ahead. What is a cognitive mechanism?
A cognitive mechanism is a class of words from the linguistic inquiry word count categories, which was developed by Jamie Pennybaker a while ago, and has been it's a set of words that have various psychological meanings, and CogMech is one of those that we used in our paper published at CL Psych last year, looking at 10 different mental health conditions and how they show up in Twitter.
And I would like to point out that Pennybaker is one of those people, he's one of those names that shows up. I know everyone says that, and then I get sort of mixed reviews, so I don't know. I've never met the guy, but he's one of those names that when we talk about the intersection of technology and linguistics and data science and mental health, he's like those names that shows up, and he's one of the grandfathers of all of that, right?
Yes, so that's a very fair statement.
Right, and so cognitive mechanisms, but you're, tell us who you are and what you're doctor of.
All right, so I'm a computational linguist. Which means that I try to get computers to understand language in the same way that you and I do. So you all are out there watching me on, the internet, and generally, probably, hopefully, not having too much of a problem understanding me. But computers have a really hard time with that. And when I make jokes or I laugh in the middle of my sentences because April's making some funny face, then computers really fall down. So I try to get computers to understand language and the meaning behind it and the signals that it provides in the same way that we do. Computers are good at some things, and humans are better at a lot of other things. So one of the things that I like to talk about computers being good at is counting. That'll take us back to the Luke categories, the linguistic inquiry word counts.
Say that again. Don't speed through that.
Luke.
Remind people what that is, because that's not a word we use a lot.
Luke categories. So the abbreviation is LIWC, linguistic inquiry word count. Hopefully somebody's tweeting this for me. I'm not live tweeting. I've got some going out.
Yeah, Twirl and Swirl's live tweeting for us tonight.
Oh, good. You're right. That's right. Hi, Trolls. The Luke categories it's just a set of words that have been categorized as having some particular meanings, like like death is one of the meanings, and personal pronouns, and there's a long set, and it's hierarchical. But that's something that's really easy to code up into a computer program to say, just go through and look for all of these words. And every time you see this word, it means that something in this category of word has occurred.
Okay.
Really boring for humans to do, like go through and read a tweet or a transcript and say, oh, here's another death word. And also it's
I do that only like on the toilet, like as a hobby.
Good. No. We can use you. That's right. We love animators.
That talent would come in handy somewhere. And we're starting to even like look at some research where the type of pronouns that people use as they get closer to maybe attempting suicide changes, or as they become depressed, like people's language changes as their severity of illness changed, which is good for the computers to count that, right?
Absolutely. That's a really good point, and is actually something that we're looking to study this summer at another workshop. It's the Jelinek Summer Workshop for Advanced Language Technology, JSALT, that Glenn Coppersmith and at Handy Schwartz and I are leading.
Dr. Handy! Sorry.
Which you guys all heard from him 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And so there we're looking to really study the change of language over time. This is something that we keep noticing in all of our papers, where we see sort of that language does change over time, and that makes sense too, right? You just think, of course, how I talk this year is very different from how I talked 5 years ago.
No, like how does language change over time?
So as you develop new interests and new categories, but also just as your mindset changes, that you can see that in language. So depression you brought up is a really classic point, where we see a lot more personal pronouns in depressed in language from people who have stated publicly, for example, on Twitter, that they're clinically depressed. They've been diagnosed as clinically depressed. Gotta get that right.
Okay.
And it's not really something that you would think about. I am a little bit aware of the number of times that I say and when I'm talking, and it's a lot.
It's not as much as you think. So here's the deal. What is like sexy and freaky? So sort of freaky sexy about you is that watching your face when I am talking to you or other people are talking to you and you become aware of our speech patterns, and then I go, shit, right? So even Bart was using, like there was a way he was even doing his vowels that you became aware of, like as he was talking, right?
Yeah, and I forget what the word was, but there is some particular word.
Or like hour or something like that.
R.
No, so in fact, you become aware as a linguist of these patterns that we have of speaking, and the computer sort of counts things and helps you become aware of them, and then you as a human really become aware of them, is what I've noticed.
Yeah, I think that you can develop some sensitivities. So the is part of what you become sensitive to, but that can't last forever, right? We talk a lot. We write a lot. We write a lot of emails. Some of us tweet a lot. So there's only so long that you can really be sensitive to the number of times that I'm saying I or my, and then it just becomes sort of background noise because it's just what's happening. You're just talking. Mm-hmm. And so computers can pick up on that, and it's hard to hide. It's hard to fake. It's hard to say, you know what, I've learned that people who are depressed say I or my more frequently, so I'm going to say it less frequently.
Right.
It's really hard to do.
Right, and I remember like someone who had read that research was like, they were asking about like work that I did, and I'm like, well, I do this, and they were like, you use the word I a lot, and I'm like, yes, because you asked me what I do, so I said I do things, and then I became hyper self-conscious. But the truth is that it's really hard to gate and hyper control your language, like even in text or speaking exhaustively. Like I think you sort of eventually default, like it would at the frequency that we use a bunch of parts of language. It's something that would be hard to intentionally disrupt on a lot of levels. Like you could maybe do it, like I could maybe just not use a certain pronoun as much, but there would be all these other language things I'd be doing, right?
Right.
So one of the reasons it's valuable
there's
is
sort of a hole, and now you're filling it in.
right. You can't not create a signal with what you do. You can't not create something measurable with your language.
Right. Absolutely.
So how does this apply? Oh, go ahead.
What we've sort of discovered over the past couple of years, it started really a decade ago, but it's really picked up in the last 2 or 3 years, and sort of got centered around this SEAL Psych workshop that I'll talk about, is that you can use language to measure somebody's mental health or mental state.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of this crazy thing. Why would that work? But it's a lot of your brain's devoted to language, and again, it's hard to fake. And so it's just a signal that comes out, and so we've started measuring it, which is a little bit creepy and a little bit cool. That's how this is. It's creepy. It's right on the line, creepy and cool.
And I'm going to have Bart comment on that in just a second, because I have Bart. I just know he has a reaction to that. But one of the things that I think is really important about that is that a lot of our tools for measuring somebody's symptomology or just aspects of them, even if we're not talking about things we might be talking about things that are characterological or just behavioral and not necessarily things related to illness, but it's actually really hard to measure those consistently and directly, and the ways we have of doing that have a tremendous amount of error and are really open to like intentional or sometimes even unintentional, but it like sort of reporting bias, because a lot of it is like what a person self-reports in various ways. So this is a way to measure somebody without self-report, which we don't actually do in mental health a lot right now.
Right. Exactly.
But what do you think about this, Bart? Creepy?
No, I think it's absolutely amazing, because my big dream that is in a therapy session, that the entire conversation would be being streamed into a computer, and you as a therapist would be getting input on all these different variables. Like, Bill Miller cites this great study about change talk. And one of the interesting things, change talk is correlated with how much change people experience outside a session. The more change talk you hear in session, the more change occurs outside a session. One of the most interesting facets of this is that the more the therapist talks, the less change talk occurs in a therapy session, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is something that a lot of therapists really have no concept of how much of the session they're talking. Mm-hmm. And so with something like this, you can provide meaningful feedback. The other thing I think is really important, and this is what's really cool and exciting about it to me, there's different types of reasoning. There's type 1 reasoning and type 2 reasoning, and type 1 reasoning is automated. We're not even really aware of all this cognitive stuff that's going on. Type 2 is much more conscious, and it's our conscious awareness. We can influence it. We feel like we have control over it to varying degrees. Where this type 1 reasoning is much more intuitive, and that's where so much of the stuff is, right? That's where so much of who we are is. And one of the ways that therapy works, interestingly enough, is by drawing attention to these automated cognitive processes, because often it's these default cognitive processes that are really getting in the way, that are creating a lot of the trouble. The person doesn't even know what's going on, and that when you can raise attention to that and call attention and give a measurement to it, and then draw that stuff up into a more conscious place, then you can start influencing. And there's things therapists can do even without making it conscious that can influence those sub-processes, right? And so language, we think of language as this conscious choice, and as you and April were just talking about, huge chunk of the language and how we're talking is completely below the threshold of consciousness.
Yeah.
We think we're being very, very intentional about our speech, but sometimes people say things like Sibian and they don't even know what they're talking about, right? I mean, it happens.
Or they text them. So, so talk a little bit about the SEAL Psych conference, because I mean you're really organizing a conference around research exactly in this area to really drive this area.
I'm so excited about this workshop. It's in its 3rd year now.
It is so awesome. I'm sorry, I went there. It was like, oh my god. Sorry.
I think it's amazing too, and I think that a lot of the attendees also really. Like it's a tiny little field, but a lot of us are really super crazy passionate about it.
And brilliant. I've never felt as stupid and like not in a bad way, but I was like, oh my god, you guys are actually like brilliant. So this is a room of some of the smartest people I've ever met in one place, right?
Smart in some ways, anyways.
Oh my God!
But like that's the point is that okay, so CL computational linguistics and clinical psychology, started from a conversation with Philip Resnick, who was on here a couple months ago, and I walking out of the one of the NLP conferences 4 years ago, and so he and his wife Rebecca Resnick and Meg Mitchell, who I think is not on Twitter but should be.
Meg is awesome.
Yeah. They.
Oh, we've had a freeze. Is she frozen for you, Bart?
Yeah, she's completely frozen.
So we have to apologize. She'll be back on another channel, but Dr. Hollingshead is frozen. She's coming back in.
Oh,
here she is. We're a little glitchy tonight, but she is here without sound like Tony. So you're going to need to hang up and come back on. I know. Or I can talk for you, but the problem is I'm as smart as Tony, but I may not be as smart as you. So let's talk. So we have SPSM alum Philip Resnick, whose wife Becky is a clinical psychologist, and of course we have Dr. Hollingshead and Meg Mitchell. You guys have not met, but who's fabulous. I got to see her research at the conference, and these folks are like, we could do some really profound research in an area where it's really needed, a very serious problem. And they, like did the CL Psych conference, and 2 years ago was the first one, and I went to the second one. And so I went, was Tony there? I can't remember. I think Tony was there. Re-invite me? She says re-invite her. I'm going to re-invite her. There we go. And we sat and we listened to this research, and what sort of blew me away was that this was really groundbreakingly innovative research that directly applied to suicide prevention and other clinical practices that was not getting presented in mental health fields, largely because those the silos had not met, right? Stepbar, what are you reacting to?
First of all, Twirls is her moderation. She is the funniest. Twirls is absolutely hysterical. So I just want to give a shout out because she's distracting me with how funny her commentary is. So
I liked on the scale of 1 to Fonzie or whatever about your hair. Really that was pretty great.
Well, how about this? The feed is currently frozen. I'm in Florida. I don't know what frozen means, but I hear you have to let it go.
It's sort of like farts. Speaking of farts, here is Dr. Hollingshead.
Wow.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Smoothest segue ever.
Yeah, I think our gig, we were bidden to actually do the communications for the space shuttle, but I think we've lost that gig after tonight's performance. I think we're out of the running on that particular. It was worth a shot, though.
So I was just saying that when I went to the second one, the commentary at the end of the second one, because it's sort of a one-day, is that they said, we really thought after the first conference, because it was one of the best conferences we'd ever been to in our lives, period, and these are brilliant people who go to conferences, and the second we're like, we can't believe it was even better than the first one. We didn't know this kind of high was possible, is what they all said. And I mean, everybody really, it was like just the atmosphere coming out of it. Talk a little bit about what you do at that conference.
So this workshop is a little bit unusual, different from the others of its ilk, in that rather than sort of each one of us going up there and talking about our paper for 15 minutes and then having 3 minutes of awkward questions and then going back and sitting down, we invite clinicians and social workers and psychologists to come and join the workshop. To act as discussants. So several of them have read a couple of the papers beforehand. We have a number of clinicians, etc., on our panel. So when the papers are sent in for submission in a couple of weeks on March 3rd.
Woo! So don't just sneak that in. Don't try to slip that past me. Say that again. So people can
it's coming
papers.
up. I think it'll come up on the tweets.
Okay. The deadline for paper submission is March 3rd.
March 3rd. We just moved it a week. You're very welcome, everybody.
Tell Handy to get with the program.
That's right. Get on it. Stop slacking. And I neglected to mention that this year I'm co-organizing with Lyle Unger, who will be on SPSM in April.
On the 17th, I love Lyle. And the thing is, I keep calling him Kyle because, you know, and so I just have to remember Sandal Lyle, and then that's how I get his name right.
All right.
Lyle, if you're listening, I'm gonna try to not script your name by April 17th.
So the workshop involves, people from both sides of the field, both NLPers and clinicians, coming together, discussing the work, and it's a very application-oriented workshop, or it's meant to be anyways. And in general, the people that are there are more interested in the applications than in just the pure research and getting another paper published, which I think is part of what's really vital about this community.
Well, and
so
I have to say, it makes the papers good. So, so sometimes you write a paper that doesn't have a lot of application and it's got a lot of words, but it doesn't get me, svitzy. And then these papers, like you read them and you're like, do you know what you could do with that? And maybe I glisten a bit. It's true. It's actually true. Bart, you read one of the papers today, didn't you?
I did, and it was really cool. One of the things that was most interesting. Mop up. Did I spit on you? That's pretty good. I mean, that's good. I mean, Hangouts has improved the sensory application of the software to a level that is blowing my mind. One of the coolest things, one of the little nuggets I found that was so interesting is not in what your words were used the most by certain groups, but some of the words that were used the least. And what was really interesting to me is it looked at a bunch of different people on Twitter that met criteria for a bunch of different illnesses: depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, seasonal affective disorder, eating disorders. And what was really interesting, and this, I think, April, you'll agree on this, people that met criteria for borderline personality disorder and eating disorders used the word "we" significantly less than all the other groups, which I thought was extremely powerful. Just in that one piece, this one word, they don't use that word a lot, right? And how that really connects to how alone they feel and how the lack of understanding and the isolation. And we think of folks that are fighting depression as isolated, but people with borderline personality disorder and people fighting eating disorders, the sense of disconnect in the world is intense. They don't even use the word "we" as much as the rest of us, and that was really powerful. That also, not only is it telling, that observation is telling, it also gives us some clues on what sorts of things we probably need to do in terms of intervention. These are folks that are really disconnected, right?
See, that's a link like that is what we need. Like, I can give you all the graphs in the world of what these people tend to say more than others, or don't tend to say. But the link to the next step to say, oh, we could use that for X. That's what I need you guys for.
Yeah, like people with borderline personality disorder struggle with sort of either way, like not being connected with what's happening with other people, and sort of not even sometimes with everything that's happening inside themselves, or they are intensely connected to the point that they can't sort of, their identity is really diffuse. And so, if we could measure their language and then start to do interventions and then say it's changing,
right?
Or even better, it's not. So what we're doing is not working. So we might consider doing. But could you imagine going to a doctor's office and getting a treatment where they didn't do tests to see if your treatment was working, and yet that's like most of mental health.
That's 99% of behavioral treatment. Yeah.
And if you don't get well, you didn't want to get well. Versus. If you want to create the blood pressure cuff, or the blood sugar test or whatever of mental health,
that's what we're trying to do.
You're doing a bunch of it, right? So, what were some of the topics that they covered because I can't remember all of them.
Okay, so some of the topics last year were from neurological conditions like autism and Alzheimer's and dementia to various mental health conditions. PTSD and depression were part of the shared task. And
Whoa, wait. What's a shared task? It's not
so
something
a shared task.
Go ahead.
A shared task. So a shared. It's kind of like a chore, I suppose. It's a chore that everybody's going to do. So it's everybody has the same data set. There's some data that's been curated. Last year, Glenn Coppersmith collected a number of tweets from people who had stated publicly that they've been diagnosed with either PTSD or depression, sometimes both. And then he also pulled their age and gender matched controls. And then we provided that data with an IRB agreement. Now I'm echoing.
Okay, hold on. Maybe me.
It was me.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. To all of the participants in the shared task. So these are people that emailed us and said, we're interested in working on this task. We're interested in solving this problem. So we would share the data with them. And then we all worked on the problem for, it was not that long, it was a couple of weeks. And then every one of us had different approaches to try and distinguish people with depression from people with depression, with PTSD from the control users who had neither, or at least had not stated that they had either of those. And so there were a lot of really interesting different approaches. The benefit of a shared task, right, is that you get to compare across groups. So I can see whether my approach worked better than Philip Resnick's, which maybe or maybe didn't work better than Andy Schwartz's.
There was an arm wrestling match. We don't speak of it.
Exactly. We do. We published on it. We published the arm wrestling match.
What's different about what you guys do is that several people work on it, generate possible different solutions, and then present all of them sort of at the same time in a relatively short turnaround span. Something that in the mental health field that's just not how we do research. And so what happens is you go one place and everyone's like, we tried it this way, and then you can really look across and sometimes there may be some insights from just seeing all the different ways that people tried the task, right?
Yep.
And what I remember from that, and of course, this is such a dumbed down version, but what I remember of that was just that things were measured different ways, different kinds of data were analyzed, and it was operationalized different ways, and so you sort of understood unique ways you could go about it. And it might be that if you publish all of those, someone who was interested in coming up with standardized ways to do that, just like I'm sure there are many ways to get a blood pressure, we just we use the things that the industry sort of standardizes that. We could probably come up with something. And you guys are also very smart. So these are very clever things.
They are at least state-of-the-art in natural language processing things.
Yes.
Smart in that way anyways.
We got a question from the group. Some of the folks are wanting to know, when you guys are looking at these different categories of diagnoses, people with depression, people with anxiety, and you're using social media data, like in the one study where you're using social media data, how are you deciding who's depressed, who's anxious, who has an eating disorder?
That's a great question. Yeah, let me be super clear about that. So what we did was we looked on Twitter for people who stated that they had been diagnosed with PTSD, for example. Let's take that one. And these statements are all occurring on Twitter, on public Twitter accounts. So we're not breaking any privacy agreements or anything. We're accessing them through the Twitter API. We did verify that they seemed to be genuine statements of diagnosis. We do get a lot of, I'm diagnosing Maryland's weather as being bipolar today. So we sort of threw those tweets away. But once we found a tweet that seemed to state a valid diagnosis of a particular condition, then we would pull the history of that user's tweets as far back as Twitter will let us, which is about 3,200 tweets, which can be a couple of weeks for a very prolific tweeter. And it can be a couple of months for somebody who's a bit slower like me. So we are not, this is important, we are not diagnosing these users as having these conditions. We are relying on their statement as being genuine.
Mm-hmm.
We are not clinicians in general. While we definitely can use and benefit from people with the subject matter expertise in these areas, we're not trying to diagnose people based on their Twitter. It's just based on what they said that they'd been diagnosed with.
And so, I mean, you're coming up with like this is like one way to say that these people might all have depression or they might all have a bipolar disorder. The truth is, you could probably do a similar kind of study where you had some sort of clinical verification and then use their Twitter API and they volunteered for that, or they gave permission for their data to be used. And that would be a way that you might continue to do the research or validate that measure, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to potentially validate. Having a clinical validation is difficult. It's
only for some women.
There's sort of two answers I want to get right. So some of Moon Deshadri's work has looked a bit at having users take a survey that indicate that they are depressed, and then asking them to volunteer their data, their Twitter data. It's a slower process. This process we have found backs up a lot of Moon's work and is a lot faster. We have a lot more data than she does.
Yes, it turns out our ways of doing that are really slow. That's part of
the problem.
It really
so as
is.
Data scientists, we love big data, and data will drive work in the field. If there's data around, we will work on it, and it doesn't always matter a lot what the data is. Oh dear.
I'm sorry.
Is everything okay?
I keep going because I just couldn't stop from making jokes. It was bad, and you just should go.
And something when you, I think, because one of the things that I think is so endearing about Kristy is she's trying to qualify these diagnoses. Or we're not clinicians. We're getting this from self-report on Twitter. Like somehow that's less valid than the diagnoses people are getting when they go see a clinician.
Yes.
Because I can tell you, there's a couple of things that our dirty little secret. I'm just doing a bunch of research about evidence-based practices and diagnoses. One, the inter-rater reliability of diagnosis in true clinical settings is atrocious.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrible. People walk into a clinician or a psychiatrist's office, and it's a crapshoot, and clinicians have their own go-to diagnoses. So and two, the other, my favorite thing, evidence-based practice is the biggest bunch of crap on the planet, because what the research shows, I'm going to put it out there, what the research shows is evidence-based practice only shows that the evidence for the practice only exists inside the research studies that are done. Once those alleged evidence-based practices get out into the real world, the fidelity is so poor that we have no real idea if, in fact, that is really working out there in the real world. All we know is that it worked in this set of studies. So what you guys are doing and this is what I was getting at, in the difference between emergent philosophies versus reductionistic philosophies. What you're doing is you're observing in real-world settings, and you're using data and statistical techniques to show us what those observations mean and how we can use those observations from an emergent standpoint to learn more and then try some things out, which is really where behavioral science needs to go. And it's one of those things that I'm really excited about. We just need, we've got some, the behavioral profession, they're quick to change. They jump on board things quickly. They adopt new technologies, and they're open to criticism about their approaches. So I'm optimistic that, no, I'm not, but I'm excited. I'm excited that somebody's doing something, for goodness sake.
There was another question from the audience for you, Dr. Hollingshead. I'm sorry, I just like your name a lot, and I know you told me to quit saying it, and I've got to stop. I find it enjoyable, and that's my fault.
You're doing a great job.
Mark, I'm not saying Hollingshead-Seitz, which is my preference because it's musical, but Mark Demore says, is the change in language use gradual over time, or are there clear lines of demarcation and movement when someone's language changes?
That's a good question.
That's a great question. I think that I'm going to give my favorite answer, which is it depends. But so if you look at, so Glenn, Meg, and I had a paper at Seal Psych last year talking about schizophrenia. And there we have a nice little graph where we compared sort of how schizophrenic one tweeter's language looks over time. And you can sort of watch it go up and then watch it come down to neurotypical, and then watch it go up and then watch it come back down. And I don't think that we understand why those ups and downs happen. I think that in some cases you might see a really sudden jump up and a really sudden jump down. This one did tend to have sort of dots along the way up and along the way down.
That's actually like way more typical for things like mood and psychotic disorders that have sort of episodic footprints. They sort of have, while they're not the same like from person to person, they have sort of fingerprints, like, and they're sort of sine waves, and they fall in a pattern because there's something cyclic happening with the brain that we don't fully understand. But like when, so clinically, so when I have someone who's really trying to learn to manage their disease in some way, we do a lot of tracking, so they start to know what it looks like with the goal of decreasing the peaks and lengths of, neurotypical functioning or more neurotypical functioning, and shortening the peak and the duration. And that's actually something we do. And they're just different from person to person, but they have a similar kind of flow. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Makes sense to me.
I'm kind of, I didn't get that you found that, but that's like totally how it looks, by the way. Wow. Wowzer.
Yeah, it was really...
Bart, stop it. Bart is like grinning at us like a fool. Bart, what are you reacting to?
I think this is amazing. I think there's so many things about this data that gets at a truer sense of how people are experiencing their lives and the things that are impacting their lives, whether those are symptoms or whether those are other things going on in the person's life. We're getting a much truer stream of information rather than having people come in and sit down and fill out a questionnaire, right? In a laboratory setting or in a classroom setting. We're actually getting
just
a look
stressful and fake. That's not your real life.
It's not, and we're actually getting to see them and see these things as they occur in a much more organic setting, and I think it's very cool.
We do too.
Woohoo! Woohoo! Sorry.
It's a love fest.
It is. And my experience as a clinician was like just watching you do something. It was it was probably like someone who's like, I do good caveman drawings, and then I go into like Michelangelo's studio and I'm like, damn. Because it's a very technical approach to something that feels very crude in the current sort of state of application. So we've got a bunch of things. Maryland's weather is bipolar. I was reading the screen face. How did they get resting bitch face on a screenshot, Quentin?
This crew is, they don't mess around, dude.
They don't mess around. That's like quick.
They do not mess around, yeah.
Can this work in reverse? If you change the language used, will that impact the patient in particular to self-harm? So like if we help someone change their language, might they be at less risk to hurt themselves or kill themselves?
I don't know.
That's a good question, Mark.
It's a great question. I would love to try and look at that. I'm not sure how we would be able to. Okay, so here's an idea, right? I said earlier something along the lines of language is hard to fake. You're going to say what you're going to say. But there are actually programs out there that sort of take what you're about to tweet or take what you're about to email and analyze it and say, you say I an awful lot in here. You might want to change these couple of instances. I could definitely imagine something that takes a tweet or an email with an opt-in process, right? I'm not breaking any privacy laws again. Mm-hmm. And says, in this email or this text, you might consider using this word instead of this word to sort of bring the language down to something that seems more neurotypical, according to basically just vocabulary counts, and see if that works. It's tough. I don't.
But our evidence-based therapy is so consistently applicable.
I think that it goes both ways. In theory, if you get someone to change their language, and the research on getting people to change their body language and the impact of the change of body language on the experienced mood. If you get people to change their word use and their language, it can in fact impact the thoughts that they're having and in some way impact their mood. So how strong is that relationship? I don't know. But the data on priming effects in human language is phenomenal,
that's a
right?
good point.
And so, but things get tricky because if the person is aware that you're priming them, then the priming effect goes away, right? So subtle priming, covert priming is very powerful. Once the priming mechanism is transparent, the person's aware of it, there is no priming effect. Like the study that was so amazing is when a bunch of researchers were asking people about how's their life. When they ask people when it's sunny, people actually say their lives are better globally. When it's rainy and crappy out, people say that it's their lives aren't as good globally. But if you have them comment on the weather and discuss the weather first, then when you ask them, that global change based on weather disappears because you've actually accounted for the priming effect, these environmental circumstances. So there's so many different things. I mean, remember when Facebook was jacking around with people's feeds to try to make them happier, more depressed? I mean, that's horrible, horrible, evil stuff, but really fun. Right?
Also sexy,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that it's not right, and sometimes things that aren't right, we just don't do them, or we don't tell people we've done them.
Or sometimes we like them a lot, and we do them all the time. But anyway.
That's often the case. So I think there's so many things that we could do. I mean, imagine right now they're doing tweets and texts to people who are in recovery. Mm-hmm. And they're finding that people who are getting regular contact, even though it's automated, that's having a positive impact on them. So we know that there's ways that this ongoing contact and messaging does get into people's implicit processing and can have a really powerful effect. So I think there's so many cool things that we could do with this, right?
So I will tell you that people are interested in that. We had a student who's commenting that saying change of language causing change in non-suicidal self-injuring habits. I'm skeptical. The research on cognitive models and treatments for NSI is really mixed. And then we have Charles Franklin who is pointing out that you need funding and support to do good research, and how do you convince donors and politicians to fund this? Just a little secret, Charles Franklin, their funding streams are a little bit more robust than ours in mental health. Kristy, would you like to talk about how you guys, like your research labs, don't give away anything that would be untoward to say, but you guys actually have a better job or a better time of getting support for your research.
Well, I will say that sure, the aspects of our research that, actually the aspects that apply to mental health, we've been struggling a little bit to find funding for. The aspects that apply to things like being able to find ads that you will like better and put those next to your Gmail or in your Facebook, that has funding. Things that teach us how to translate things better, that has funding, although that's drying up a little bit, I think. It's also a little bit easier to talk about neurological health, so things like ALS and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. That's, I would say, a little easier to get funding for as well. Nobody wants to talk about mental health. Nobody wants to admit that it's
nobody wants to pay to talk about it. Nobody wants to pay to talk about it.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
Let me tell you, people are talking about mental health all the time. Paying to talk about it effectively, different story. Mm. But so we need to. So the good news is that we already at SPSM really do carry on an ongoing thread of conversation about advocating that this is important, this is solvable, we have expertise, funding could change things, there are solutions. We're not asking you to throw money into a pit where nothing changes. Right. These are some things that really have a shot that have they weren't possible before. This kind of data analysis wasn't possible 5 years ago even, right?
Right.
And so this is possible now. So if you were to give a pitch, if somebody who is interested in doing this kind of research, who said we could fund it, like what like what would make a good project, or what kind of funding, or what kind of resources would you need to do something that would make a difference?
So we need data, and we need cross collaborations.
So explain what kind of data you need, because I don't think you mean like cell phone data. Because for $10 a month, I can get you more.
Okay, so we need data with content. So whether that's Twitter, which we've been using for a while because that's public and available, or it's an electronic health record, or it's the crisis text line, which is making their data available. At least they're opening up the applications for that data in 2 days, which we're all chomping at the bit for. That's exciting.
Say that again.
Applications, anyways. So crisis text line is opening up applications for access to their anonymized text data.
Nice.
Yes.
In 2 days, on February 16th.
And I need to disclose that I'm on the advisory board, and I didn't make you say that. This is just something that's really of interest. This is just sort of a news event that is really of interest to
relevant.
Right, because the issue quite simply is that mental health folks haven't been, in a very self-aware way, collecting data sets that then could be used by data science experts. A lot of the data that we collect is not data that you can use for all sorts of reasons. Political and bureaucratic, as well as just functional, just like hacking it and analyzing it reasons, right?
Right.
And so,
reasons.
Yeah, and so Crisis Text Line specifically employed a data scientist, and they thought about their data as they generated it, so that they then had a set to provide to people. And you should also be clear that this is not people's like really private details. These data sets aren't what you would think. It's not like people like emotional nudie shots.
Right.
I know. It's just how it's the doc form anyway it comes out. So explain what a data set might look like.
So a data set might be the tweets from somebody who does have a diagnosis. It might be with crisis text line. It might be the texts between somebody who's in crisis and texting in, and a counselor. In which case we can sort of look at that in a couple of different ways. We can look at the language on the counseling side and on the user, the texter side. And
this is de-identified, and you're processing it in such large scales that you're not really looking at individual conversations, right?
Right. It's there's very little data for data scientists to work on at the individual conversation level. So yes, we look at data that's sort of at the aggregate level. One of the important things, though, is that if we're given data that's already been aggregated, then it's very hard to do anything with it, because part of what the data science analysis is that aggregation of sort of slicing and dicing the data in different ways. And so when it sort of comes pre-aggregated, then it's hard to, you can only slice it in the way that it's already been pre-sliced.
So just really, like, just in your great teaching way that you have, can you explain the difference between pre-aggregated and unpre-aggregated data?
Okay, so imagine your Twitter stream, April.
Okay. Robust, a little dirty. Go ahead.
An unaggregated data set of your Twitter stream would be all of the tweets and retweets and text and photos that you have sent out over the last 3,200 messages, so like the last day.
Or month, yeah, sure.
An aggregated set would be a word cloud, indicating what words you tend to say more and what words you say less, but with no way to get at the actual message that you sent.
Right. So
does that make sense?
So
it's like summarized.
Yeah. So if you get it sort of already analyzed, yeah. So it's like a meatloaf. There's the chuck roast, and then you grind it up and add a bunch of junk to it, and then you can't really do anything with that.
That's right.
It's like meatloaf.
I mean, you have a meatloaf, and maybe it's tasty or not, but you can't
it's not
the ingredients back out.
You can't turn it back into a chuck roast.
Right.
It's what happens in my. I keep saying that. What happens in my brain, Dr. Hollingshead? Bart, you're reacting.
Well, I mean, when we were talking to Glenn Moriarty with 7 Cups of Tea, you know, they're not getting the unaggregated data. They're just getting metadata. And I really, in talking to him, I mean, that's a huge. I mean, that's 800,000 chats a month. They would start, you know, holding on to that and you know, anonymous, unaggregated data, that would be a wealth of information,
right?
Because there's so much going on there, and so that's a topic I think we need to bring back up with him and see if that's even possible, because that's a huge data source, huge.
And my understanding is we've actually hooked some data scientists up with, like, there's some stuff like SPSM. So what people should know about SPSM is that, like, there's what we do at the show, but then we really create a collaborative community, and we work very hard to try to introduce people that we think might be able to do a collaboration that's mutually beneficial. And so I think there's some movement on that, which is, I mean, I'm glad that you had the same sort of reaction that I did.
I love SPSM for the cross-collaboration that it has built. There's been a number of relationships that have come out of just participating in these chats over the last, not even a whole year yet.
I know. It's amazing.
And I think that is, that's really the strength of CL Psych. And part of what I was looking for from this chat was to say, you know, we need you guys to pair up with us guys, us data scientists. And I will say that SPSMers as a whole have become very aware of data and very data science-ish.
That we can even, like, be mental health people, and we can say pre-aggregated, aggregated, metadata, and we sort of know what we're talking about, and can compare it to Meatloaf and Chuck Roast. Is like we've grown as people.
It's awesome.
We do have a question, Charles Franklin, it is a pleasure.
Who has had a lot of good things to say over there. I'm seeing them go by, and
he says, how can we help you? Like, he wants to know, how can we help with CL Psych 16, and how can we help with some of these CL Psych efforts?
Awesome. So you can help by participating in the shared task, which that data has yet to come out. There's a Google group for it. Join the Google group. Indicate that you're interested. You can help by working with other data scientists in the group. There is a separate Google group for CL Psych. Which is, I think, linked from clpsych.org, and if it's not, it will be after this chat. Join that group. Go on there. Say that you're a subject matter expert. Say what you're interested in. If you have data, we will jump on you. Watch out. But if you're interested,
they'll work your data. They'll jump on you and work your data if it's big. I'm sorry, I can't help it.
If there's a particular interest that you have, we might have some data, or we might be able to pull it from Twitter and work with you on that. We need that subject matter expertise that we're just running around with our tools, and it's kind of dangerous. We need to partner with you guys.
I'm dying. I don't even know what to Bart.
You can come. Oh, you can come to CL Psych. You can submit your own paper. Due March 3rd. You can come to CL Psych. It's in San Diego. We're looking for sponsors to bring discussants to CL Psych. If you know somebody with deep pockets, send them my way. I will give them a pitch. If you know somebody in the San Diego area who would like to be a discussant, we have some low sponsors right now that can pay for the registration if there's no travel involved. There's lots of ways to help.
and be really clear that when we did this last year, like, we live tweeted, like, when I was there, live tweeted, and you can see the story-fies of that. And now we, like, totally Periscope and stuff. So, like, hopefully people there there'll be a live stream, so that it's really better to go in person, because let me tell you, when you go out to dinner afterwards with everybody, the whole experience is super collaborative. Outside of the presentations, it is like just mainlining innovation. I can't emphasize how overwhelmingly special the experience was. But if you can't do that, like, look for it on social media, because you might participate that way.
Yeah, we will try to Periscope this year. I think Tony is coming, and there is some scheming to try and get some others to come.
Ooh.
if nothing else, we'll have somebody sitting there with a cell phone and periscoping.
This is wonderful. There are more questions than we can get to in the last minute. We are going to have to really cram in final thoughts. I'm going to go first, and we'll let you go next. But on final thoughts, do follow the CL Psych and the CL Psych 16 hashtag. Participate in the conversation. Join the Google groups. There are a lot. You have experience, lived experience, clinical expertise, research expertise in mental health, but not in data science. They really want to hear from you. If you know how to get to a data set, they want to hear from you. These are folks ready and willing to tackle this problem. Kristy, any last thoughts?
We love you guys. Happy Valentine's Day. Please pair up with us. Data science and mental health. Perfect pair.
Because it's Valentine's. Bart, any final thoughts?
Thank you, Kristy. This was really cool. The research that you guys are doing, it's going to change the world. We just need to get more data and get you guys access to more data. And thank you so much for being on the show tonight. Phenomenal.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you for having me.
This is at Doc Foreman. So many dirty jokes I didn't tell tonight because we're a classy operation. You've spent another evening with SPSM, and some of you are having Valentine's, and you're watching it, and it is Monday morning. Well, let me tell you, it was probably better during, but it's just as good the day after. We're sort of like Meatloaf. You can reheat us. Definitely like us on Facebook. Share this YouTube if it was useful. Participate in the groups. Hashtag CLPsych16. And everybody follow at Hollingk, right?
You got it. You got it.
HOLLINGK. And get with her if this is something that interests you. Everybody have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.